Hey, Grace, glad to catch up with you on the first day of May. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you, and a very happy May Day to you as well.
Yes. So we see the latest poll. How do you rate the performance of the ruling parties over the past 6 months?
I think they've gotten off to a shambolic start, and I think New Zealanders are looking at the current government and thinking, "Well, I'm not sure that this is what we voted for when we voted for a change at the last election." They're doing a lot of things that they said they wouldn't do, such as rolling back our smoke-free laws and cutting support for disabled people, threatening to cut the free and healthy school lunches program. But also on a day-to-day basis, New Zealanders are just seeing a government that's busy squabbling with itself. And, we've got the Prime Minister and the two Deputy Prime Ministers all arguing about who's in charge. And I think they're not focused on the issues that New Zealanders wanted them to focus on when they voted for them. Cost of living, tackling crime.
Yes.
These are issues that the government just seems to be missing in action on.
So if you did point out, what do you think are the three areas was the ruling parties really messed up? Three area.
If I had to pick three areas, I would say that, overall, just going backwards rather than having a plan to go forwards is probably their biggest weakness. They've spent the first 6 months just repealing things, cancelling things, stopping things, and they've ground the country to a standstill as a result. Thousands of people in the private sector
Yes.
being put out of work, as well as in the public sector because of the government's decision. So I'd say that's probably the big one. Having the wrong priorities is the second one. So where they have done things like, the tax cuts for landlords, $2.9 billion worth of tax cuts for landlords, versus, support for the disabled community or food in schools. I think they've got their priorities wrong there overall. And then I think the third criticism of them is that they're just not focused on the big issues that New Zealanders wanted them to focus on, which are things like the cost of living and tackling crime.
Yes, I agree with that. So states of New Zealand showing the living cost is very important for everybody. For the regular family has shot up by 6.2%. How long do you think it will be keep like that?
Well, I think when we left government, so when the election rolled around, we had inflation trending back down again with the intention and with the forecasts that we would get inflation back to the 1 to 3% target range by the end of this year. What that means is that costs would stop increasing in the way they have been. Then in time we would see interest rates coming back down, and life would go on. What we're seeing from this government is a number of the decisions that they've been taking are actually increasing costs for New Zealand families. So, cutting public transport subsidies means that the cost of getting around the city goes up, and that happened yesterday. Been a big increases in transport costs yesterday.
Yes.
We're still seeing internationally high fuel prices. When you're starting to get up around $3 a litre to fill up your car, that's really going to hurt New Zealand families. Rents are continuing to go up despite the $2.9 billion in subsidies they've given to landlords. Rents are still going up. So that policy's clearly been a failure. They said they were doing this to bring rents down for tenants. It hasn't worked. Rents are continuing to go up. And they're putting a lot of people out of work, which is making the cost of living worse for people. So that's before they even get to this year's budget, where any benefit that New Zealanders might receive from tax cuts, which are likely to be a lot less than the
I remember you say it's not
$250 a
the right
fortnight they
time.
promised them,
Yeah.
they're going to see them disappear in higher inflation.
Yeah, I think the living cost is very important for the every family. Everybody will feel very hard in 2024. But we saw the news, the parliament, every MP is increased their salary. I hear from some voice, they want to say the government just want to keep them pocket money as much as they can, but they don't care. A lot of people at the front line worker, they lose their job. How did you evaluate this voice?
Yeah, look, I didn't ask for a pay increase, so these decisions are made independently of politicians, and I think we should stay out of that process. But I do think that the New Zealanders who are losing their jobs and those who are finding that their incomes aren't going up should actually, they've got a right to feel frustrated with the current government. This is about choices. The government does not have to be making thousands of people redundant. They're choosing to do that. They don't, the decision they made around increasing minimum wage, for example, below the rate of inflation, that was a choice they made. And as a result, I understand why New Zealanders feel pretty frustrated when they see this sort of thing happening.
We knew the Labour Party has been working so hard to keep the low unemployment rates during the COVID-19, but I think the current government may make things worse. Could you explain how big a deal is the unemployment rate for our economy?
Oh, the unemployment rate's huge for the whole of the economy. When people lose work, they stop spending money. That actually has a flow-on effect to other businesses, and then more people lose work, and the whole effect of it snowballs from there. Which is why during the COVID-19 period, we worked so hard to keep people in work with things like the wage subsidy, because actually we knew that that was going to be really critical to our economic recovery once the pandemic was over. This government seemed to be going out of their way to put people out of work. And I do want to reiterate, it's not just those working in the public sector. We're seeing thousands of people in the public sector lose their jobs, but there are a lot of people in the private sector losing their jobs as well because of the government's decision, for example, to cancel a lot of the infrastructure projects that were underway under the previous government.
So yesterday, the Ministry of Education in New Zealand rolled out 6 education priority. I know as an ex-education minister, how would you rate our education system? Because I think it's for the family, they have the kids, it's very important to you. How do you rate our New Zealand education system?
I think making lists is the easy part. You can make lists of priorities. It's actually getting improvements in educational outcomes that's the hard part. A lot of the things that are on their lists are things that were happening anyway. So we were already in the process of rewriting the curriculum. The work they're doing around literacy, which is changing the way we teach literacy, that work started under our government and that's continuing under their government. I think that's good that they're continuing with that because we know that that will make a difference. So lists are all very well, but actually making the changes that are needed, that's going to be harder work for them.
So in your mind, how do the government change this system? Can they do that?
Well, I think the government can improve educational outcomes. I think one of the things they can do is invest in teachers. There's a lot of distraction in education policy debate, whether open plan classrooms are better than smaller classrooms, whether cell phones in schools makes a difference. If you actually look at the research, these are all distractions. The thing that makes the biggest difference to kids' educational achievement is the quality of the teaching that they get. So if the government really wants to change things, then actually investing in quality teaching is where they should be focusing their attention.
Totally agree with that. So how do you evaluate the expulsion of Melissa Lee from the government cabinet?
I think, Melissa Lee, unfortunately, just wasn't up to the job. She'd had years in opposition, I think 5 or 6 years as the opposition broadcasting spokesperson, to come up with a plan for what the government wanted to do in the broadcasting and in the media space to ensure that we still have a diverse, and challenging media, because that's essential to democracy. And she didn't have a plan. And as a result, when the media crisis started to unfold, she was just missing in action. And so I think she was just out of her depth. I hope the current government will come up with a plan now, because for the sake of democracy, making sure that we've got a vibrant media with a whole range of different voices is actually really, really important.
Yeah. So about the criminal, there was several robberies in Auckland shopping center during the past few days. And the police intel system maintenance, I think, got delayed due to the government cuts. Do you think the current government can handle this situation well?
Yeah, I think there's a variety of different issues here. One is the 111 system. Ultimately the 111 system needs to be replaced. The fact that it hasn't yet been replaced doesn't mean that the current system isn't up to scratch. Call 111, you'll still get through, you'll still speak to an operator, you'll still get the support that you need. But we know that in time, that's an older system now, and we're going to need to upgrade that. So the current government will be looking at that as part of this year's budget, and I hope that they'll fund that upgrade. But the bigger issue around ram raids, smash and grabs and violent crime, those are really concerning areas. And We were doing a lot of work as a government to combat that. We had a number of different things in place to deal with violent offenders and to deal with the increasing number of young people who were offending. The new government said that they didn't agree with our approach. They said they were going to fix all of this. Mark Mitchell, the new Minister of Police, said he would resign within a year if he hadn't fixed the problem. Well, he's halfway there and the problem's getting worse. So I think there's a lot of pressure on him now to come up with some actual solutions.
Yeah. So on the diplomatic front, we have seen Winston Peters hand to NATO and the Prime Minister stepping up the cooperation with the Philippines. Well, he's saying won't be go to Taiwan while in office. I think all three seem to link to China. Do you think the current government of foreign strategy is missing?
I think one of the challenges there is that they're not really kind of clearly articulating what their foreign policy is. We've worked pretty hard over a long time to try and maintain a relatively bipartisan approach to foreign policy in New Zealand. So on issues such as the very important relationship between New Zealand and China, the Labour and National parties have actually tried to be relatively, cohesive on that. This government seemed to be stepping away from that a little bit. So their positioning around AUKUS, for example, is one of the things that's, I know, raising a lot of eyebrows internationally. They need to actually be a bit clearer with New Zealand about what it is they're doing there. Because I think at the moment there's just a big information void. I don't think we know what the current government's overall foreign policy is. And it's probably time they started to tell people what it is.
Yeah, you talk about the AUKUS as one of the five eyes with the future of the AUKUS. I think the world seems to think Japan is go ahead or go to hand of New Zealand. How do you view that?
Look, at this point, Pillar 2 of AUKUS is still pretty ill-defined, and it's unclear what New Zealand might get from that or what benefit we might get from being involved in that. So I think before the current government start making statements about the need for New Zealand to be involved in AUKUS, which they already have been saying, I think they really needed to set out why they think that and what they think we'll get out of it, because at the moment they haven't done that. And so I think as a result, they're creating a lot of unnecessary anxiety.
So did you will be against we join to AUKUS the second part?
Well, we're certainly, New Zealand should be, not in favour of the first part. We're not in favour of nuclear warfare.
Yes.
And so nuclear-powered submarines is something that New Zealand, consistent with our long-standing nuclear-free policy, should continue to say we're not going to be part of that. I made that very clear as Prime Minister. We wouldn't be part of a nuclear pact, and I hope the current government will continue with that approach. On Pillar 2, I also said as Prime Minister that I wasn't convinced that we would get anything out of Pillar 2 that we couldn't get out of our existing relationships with the US, the UK and Australia. And so if the current government disagree with that assessment, then they need to really explain to New Zealanders why that is.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for your time today. It's looking forward to catch up next time. Thank you so much.
Lovely to talk to you. See you later.
Have a good day. Bye. See you next
Bye-bye.
time. Bye.